Hello, fourth grade. This is Miss Bruin in our virtual lab. And in this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about solar energy. Most of you probably already know that solar energy is the energy that comes from our sun. But what can the sun's energy really do? How powerful is it? I'm going to give you a minute to think of some examples of what the sun has the power to do. Some things that I thought of were all the plants that sun's energy or solar energy is able to make grow. So really, like, those plants are things that we eat, right? Those plants grow vegetables, those plants grow fruits. Some of the plants are just eaten, like the leaves we eat, right? Like lettuce and kale. And so that sun has the power to make plants grow, which supports all life on Earth, really. That sun has the power to be stored and eventually transferred in order to run a car. And for many, many years, these are some women down on the island of Haiti, and they're Haitian, and they are using the power of the sun to cook. And this has been like an age-old tradition in many places where you don't have access to running electricity, or sometimes the electricity or the energy grid is unpredictable. You could use solar cookers, and this is a pretty high-tech one. But there are many, many, many cultures that have used the power of the sun to cook their food for many, many years. So the sun has an awful lot of energy that it gives to the earth. And the reason why the sun is able to generate a ton of energy is because it's constantly going through a process called nuclear fusion. So you're probably wondering, how does the sun generate all this energy? And it actually, all the energy that comes down from our sun is generated from a process called nuclear fusion. Now, this might sound familiar to you because it is the same process that scientists use to create nuclear power at a nuclear power plant. And so you don't have to understand the chemistry or the physics behind all of this, but so the sun is this giant ball of hydrogen. And what's constantly happening is those hydrogen atoms, these tiny particles, are heated so much that they turn into this plasma state where their electrons escape. And they basically, the atoms split apart. And that process is called fusion. And it unleashes these huge bursts of energy. And that's why we benefit from all the sun's energy, because the sun is constantly going through this process of nuclear fusion. Solar energy is actually the mother of a ton of other major energy sources that we use to power our world. Thermal energy, which is the heat energy that we have on Earth. We know heat has the power to move things. Wind energy, which we are also using more of more recently. We're harnessing wind energy, but that ultimately comes from the energy of the sun. And I'll explain why in a second. And then finally, fossil fuels. All these three major sources of energy that we use to power our world can ultimately be traced back to the energy from our sun. Here's how. So, if we think about all the thermal energy on Earth, right? We have our sun, and the sun gives off that energy in the form of radiation if you've ever made a solar oven, you know how hot that radiation is. Even though we can't see it in the air, there's heat coming down from that sunlight. And so some of the incoming solar radiation, some of that energy is reflected by the Earth's surface and it's sent back out to space. Some of it is absorbed by the Earth's surface, and our Earth's surface is then warmed, whether that's the water or the air or the land. And some heat is reflected off again. But our atmosphere has an end to it, right? There are these greenhouse gases that also trap some of that heat. That's what makes Earth livable, right? So this atmosphere layer here, do you see how it ends at some point? And that's where all the greenhouse gases are. And it kind of makes a little like cap, or almost like a greenhouse, if you will, where it traps some of that heat, which makes our Earth a livable temperature. So our thermal energy on Earth is here because of our sun. Wind energy is also a result of solar energy. The solar energy that comes down from the sun, that radiation creates different areas of the Earth's surface, some of which are warmer, some of which are colder. There's an uneven heating of our Earth's surface. And in those areas where it's warmer, there's low pressure air. And that air, I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, hot air rises or heat rises. That hot air rises up, allowing that cold air to blow in with some higher pressure. And so these uneven areas where that have hotter air and that have cooler air, that is actually what creates wind. So our solar energy coming from the sun is actually what creates wind energy if you trace it back. Not only that, all those fossil fuels you learned about, the organisms, the plants, the animals that fossilized, all those organisms ultimately got their energy from the sun all those millions and millions of years ago. So all of these energies, thermal energy, wind energy, any kind of fossil fuel, all of these different kinds of energy can actually be traced back to solar energy. How powerful is that? I'm going to leave you with that thought, and I'll be back to talk about different kinds of solar energy in the next video.